Good morning, everyone. My name is Dave Zan, and I would like to start the Pre-SAB State Allocation Board meeting for June 22nd. And without further ado, I do have one quick announcement before I turn the mic over on the fiscal reports, that we do have a July 13th joint agency meeting, DSA, OPSC, CDE, and we'll be going over various topics that we're still finalizing right now at this point. And I believe it'll be in the afternoon, but look for a web blast that would announce time and location. It will be in this building right here where we're at, and it will also be webcast for those that cannot attend. So look for that on July 13th, the day after the board. Remember the July 12th board also, which is another change for July. Normally we'd have the fourth Wednesday, but it's moved up to July 12th to accommodate various board schedules. So without further ado, I'd like to turn the mic over temporarily to Rick Asbell to discuss the fiscal condition right now at this point.
Good morning, everyone. So here's a breakout based on the different bond sales that we've had for the program, comparison between May 2011 and June of 2011. Our biggest drawdown was for the November 2010 bond sale. We went from $140.3 million down to $78.8 million. We do have some other activities in some of the other bond sales. All told for the month, funds available in May went from $500.8 million down to $412 million, which is a reduction of $88.8 million. This is our status of bond authority for Propositions 1D, 5547 as it relates to new construction bond authority. The total bond authority is $14.6 billion. Of that amount, we have been able to apportion, which is in the blue area, 92.8% of that amount. The red area, which is the unfunded approvals, amounts to 3.8% of the total. And then the remaining bonding authority is 3.4% of that total, which is in yellow, and that dollar amount is $503 million. Are there any questions? Okay, I'll turn it back over to Dave. Thank you.
Thank you, Rick. Okay, so I would like to go to, we have a lot of very busy agenda this time. By the way, the meeting will be, unless we change it, but we're trying to get a location at the Capitol to accommodate the board members, but unfortunately, with all the hearings and things going on, we will be, not unfortunately, it's a good location. It'll be at the CDE building on 1430 N Street, room 1101 at 4 p.m. today, unless we change it, and I don't think we're going to change it, so I think we're pretty much locked at the CDE building. So I'd like to get into the one non-specific item that is applicable to districts out there that would potentially qualify for the seismic mitigation program. So on page 220 of the agenda, for those of you that have actually pulled it up, what we're doing with this item is bringing forward conforming regulations as a result of numerous discussions in the seismic subcommittee and also through board direction at the last May board to bring forward proposed regs after discussion and vetting at the seismic subcommittee. So what we have in front of us right now, I'll summarize real quickly, is a regulation proposal that would do several things. One, it would eliminate some of the root criteria for the seismic mitigation program. As you'll recall, we had the spectral acceleration, the 1.68 factor that has been heavily discussed and talked about whether or not that's the correct threshold, if it's too high. A lot of discussions along those lines, and through various discussions, it was decided that the spectral acceleration threshold would be dropped in favor of other criteria. So what is before you in this item is conforming regulations that increase the number of buildings to the Category 2 buildings. We've included 6 additional Category 2 buildings, for a total of 14 now, where there were only 8 previously. So all Category 2 buildings will now be eligible for funding in this program. In addition to that, you'll need to have a building that is still being occupied by students and staff, either has been or will be occupied by students and staff, and also that there is a local structural engineering report that outlines the building's deficiencies, and ultimately that building will need to have DSA concurrence that yes, the building is in fact in jeopardy. DSA will have to concur with that pursuant to their standards that they're developing right now, and that's forthcoming. They'll be vetting from our discussions with DSA. They'll be having their own internal meetings with their constituency to vet their requirements on how they'll run that program. In addition, there's some language in the regulation that talks about landslides, liquefaction, those kinds of specific site conditions. If those conditions exist, DSA is not qualified to concur or not concur with those kinds of site conditions and whether they're a problem. So in the regulation, it talks about those kinds of situations also that would need to be, as far as our office, as far as DSA, if those conditions exist, there would need to be a geological hazard survey report that would outline those issues, and then the geological survey California Geological Survey would look at that and concur, because they have the geologists and the specialties in shop that could review those specific site conditions and weigh in on whether or not they concur or not. So a lot of things included in this regulation, but that's the bottom line now is that we have a program that's designed to open it up, provide more access, potentially to districts, the spectral acceleration with that going away, with the inclusion of all Category 2s, with a structural engineering report that outlines deficiencies, and with DSA concurrence, theoretically, a district can come in now and access this funding in better fashion. Lastly, there's some discussion in the regulations that deals with what happens when the funding is fully subscribed, and what we have in the regulation is that the district will have the option when we get to the last dollars and the last project is more money than what we have available in the pot of money for the seismic mitigation program. In those situations, the district can decide whether or not to take a reduced apportionment or just say, no, I don't want to take any apportionment at all. And beyond that, then it also talks about returning of the applications once we get to that point. So we'll continue to approve projects until the full authority for the program is used up. So there will be a discussion in the item at the board concerning that that approach and whether or not there's an establishment of an unfunded list or whatever. But our approach in the regulation is it's first come, first serve, as long as they're eligible in the new criteria until the money's used up, and then the applications will be returned. So, questions? Lau.
Morning, Dave. Is this working?
Good morning.
Is this working?
Can you folks hear him? Okay, yeah, it's working.
Dave, I have a question about procedurally how that works, because what your regulation proposal says is that if you submit the last project and it's over the amount of funding available, you have to reduce the project to give an unfunded approval. So let's say you have a $2 million project and there's $1 million left, you have to reduce your project to $1 million.
The district will have the option of whether or not they want to.
It's not an option. You won't accept it and put it unfunded unless you do. So the district will have to reduce it to $1 million, even though it's a $2 million project. Well, let's say they agree to do that, and then it turns out there's only $500,000 left, so they still have a project that's too big. So they say, no, I don't want it. You don't have any more projects because you're recommending no unfunded list, so you don't have any more projects. So I'm not sure what you're going to do with that balance of funding, whatever it turns out to be. It would make a lot more sense to at least let the last project come in and unfunded at whatever level it is, because then you always have the option of not accepting the total funding. And of course, I would like to see you change that so that that project would get whatever money is available and become eligible for any money that might be returned to the program at a later date. That would make a lot more sense to me procedurally. I think it works better. It's easier. Everybody understands it. So I don't see procedurally how your process works, because amongst other things, you won't have any unfunded projects to go to. Thanks, Dave.
Okay, thank you. Just to follow up, so Lau, what you're proposing then in your example, if you have a $2 million project, there's only $1 million available, that we would, in essence, create an unfunded list for the $1 million that's not there? Is that what you're saying? That's what I thought I heard you say.
Yeah,
okay.
Technically, it's
and
unfunded. Technically, it's unfunded for that $1 million, but that $1 million might become available.
Yeah.
Through savings of other projects. It doesn't make any sense to me to make that last project, so we have to be the last project suffer potentially, half of the project cost shortage simply because we created a process that doesn't allow for that to be rectified.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate your comments, and that will be, I'm sure there will be a spirited discussion at the board concerning that very same issue. So I look forward to that discussion. So we'll take direction from the board, obviously, and revise if appropriate. So are there any other questions? Okay. So then at this point, I'd like to turn it over to Masha with DSA, if she's ready to go. Okay.
All right, good morning. I brought props with me. So for DSA update item today, I'd like to highlight a new bulletin that was released on our website this morning. It deals with the impact of Assembly Bill 11, which was became law on January 1st, but goes into effect on July 1st of this year, so in just a couple of weeks. It's concerning door hardware. That's why I brought an example of a lock with me, and I'll demonstrate, just to make this a little bit more fun. So this is the citation from the Education Code section that was added by Assembly Bill 211, and it's part of the School Facilities Program article in the Education Code, and it requires that all new construction projects that come to DSA after July 1st shall include locks that allow doors to classrooms in any room with an occupancy of 5 to be locked from the inside. And this was done in response to various incidents on school sites and emphasis on lockdown procedures. And in our bulletin, we even cite the legislative digest that cites the intent of the legislature with this bill. So you're welcome to read that. The Education Code also requires that whatever the locks shall also meet Title 24, California Building Code requirements, and provides an exemption for doors that are locked from the outside at all times, and pupil restrooms. Doors that are locked from the outside at all times would be like supply closets, things like that. Now, the way that this law applies, it applies to SFP projects, and the way that DSA recognizes them is that we have box 16 on our application form, DSA 1, and it asks the question of whether the district is planning to submit the project to the Office of Public School Construction for funding under the SFP, and if the district answers yes, we treat this project as a state-funded project. We will look at all new buildings and room within new buildings, and all occupancies are impacted by this requirement. So it doesn't matter if it's what the occupancy designation is, assembly versus teaching station, et cetera, all occupancies are subject to this requirement. And then if we determine that the project is lacking in compliance, we will address that in our comments, just like we do with all other items of noncompliance on the that we find during the plan review. So what does the code currently say about locks? It talks about, it has a requirement that the hardware on the exits from any kindergarten through 12th grade public school room that is normally occupied must be readily openable from the egress site without the use of a key or special knowledge of effort. So let me demonstrate. So basically under the current building code, anybody who's inside needs to be able to get out without use of any special key or knowledge, right? Lower the handle, get out. Well, this new law requires the doors to also be locked. So the way that the two requirements work together in the kind of lock that would meet the provisions of both the new law, AB 211, and the current edition of the building code is the one that would lock from the inside, but you can still get out without having to unlock this. All right? And so, of course, for those kids that like to play pranks on their teachers, the teacher would need to have a key to get in the room. But that's from the outside. So, anyway, I thought it would be fun to demonstrate, and then if you're interested, we have more fun toys like this at DSA headquarters. And so that's kind of the briefing on that new bulletin. Does anyone have any questions about the locks, my toy, or my demonstration skills? Okay. So I'll be practicing, I think, this in other presentations, but that's the deal with the locks. So the next part of my presentation is just the regular updates on our bin times, which is the wait time for projects to be assigned to plan review. And as far as our bin times go, compared to a month ago, our statewide average for structural has gone down, but other areas of our plan review, like fire life safety and access in certain regions of the state, do remain high, and that's based on staffing and workload and just the combination of the two. So fire life safety, the various bin times are posted right here, and then the access bin times again. In some areas, they do remain high, while others, like Los Angeles, we are seeing a decline, which probably has to do with just a reduction in workload. We do post bin times weekly, and they're updated and posted on our website under the tab metrics. And then our processing days, I've been presenting these every month, but what I've noticed on the average processing days for all the different types of projects that we do, access only, over the counter, small projects, medium, and our large projects, our average processing days remain virtually unchanged. So they stay pretty much the same, maybe with a day or two difference from month to month. So our average processing days are 97, but I think that's weighted heavily towards smaller projects, which we have more of. Of course, in our larger projects, the time's more than double for average processing time. And that's the end of my presentation, unless you have any questions? No. Okay. Then I'll pass this on to Fred.
Good morning. I have a short presentation. Usually I can't figure this out. So we're going to talk about a number of these things I've talked about over the last few months, but I wanted to give you continued updates on that. So, Schools of the Future Initiative are the advisory panels convened by Superintendent Torlakson. They gave a report to him on June 1st, and the written report is on its way up to him, and he will read it, consider it, and from there there'll be future actions that will come out over the summer. So stay tuned for that. As a reminder, here's the two main committees with the 4 subcommittees in each: High Performance Schools Subcommittee and the School Facility Program Reform Subcommittee. Also July 1st, in addition to locks, is the requirement for free fresh drinking water in places where students eat during mealtime. It does not have to be cold, does not have to be warm, doesn't have to be any temperature. It has to be free and fresh. We've been getting questions as to whether it needs to be refrigerated, cold. Free and fresh is what the law says. And there are some provisions in code that a board may take action to exempt themselves from this provision if there is a extremely harsh cost to it, or there's other health and safety concerns for providing the water. Take a look at the guidance on our webpage, and in our Nutrition Services Division, Robin and Mike are some resources to you can talk to about what the provisions of the bill are, and some other resources on water and why it's important. All right. Safe routes to school. July 15th, deadline for applying for the $42 million in safe routes to schools. That the district must apply with another municipality, whether it's a city, county, transit district, and other public agencies. And they can do items, sidewalks, crosswalks, some contribution towards signaling, signalization. So take a look at that, a way to maybe complete some of the paths to travel to your schools. And there's the resources for that. Okay. And finally, I wanted to talk about a Title V design principle. And this is in Title V, Section 14010B. That's the section of Title V dealing with the standards for site selection. B, you can see the abbreviated version there says that the acreage is consistent with what is in our guide, the book that we use to determine the acreage. If it's less than that acreage, you must demonstrate how a physical education program will be provided. And by policy, if it's under 70% of that number, we wanted to see the written plan and how that happens. We've seen in the paper almost every day reports on the condition of the obesity in kids and the value of physical activity and how that translates into academic success. Kids are more alert, more healthy. Okay. This education code section discusses, among other things, the required minutes for PE. Physical education is the only curriculum area where there's a required time. Other things like math, English are contents proficiency. Physical education has the proficiency aspect in the assessment, the physical assessment, but it is driven by the number of minutes. 200 minutes every 10 days for the elementary students and 400 minutes every 10 days for the secondary students. For the upper grades in high school, a local board may take action to exempt students having a waiver for competitive sports, but they must also provide elective PE opportunities for those students if they wish to take them. Now, there was recent articles in the paper about a court case. I believe it was Albany School District. There were parents who took action against the district for not meeting the requirements of the 200 minutes per day. And that went all the way up to, I believe, the state appellate court. The State Board of Education has adopted content standards for physical education. You can see the 9 areas. The 9th one was just added, was self-defense. So we have aquatics, individual dual sports, team sports, combatives, kind of striking things, hitting things. It's not really combatives. Now, when we look at a district that comes in with a plan because of the requirement of the 70%, or they just do it as a part of their aspects of planning physical education, one of the things to keep in mind is a physical education class at the elementary schools are probably the class in itself, so 20 to 30 kids. The provisions of class size reduction do not apply for time in PE, so you could split the kids up into 30 and still not run afoul of that for the lower grades. For high schools, they run in the range of 40 to 50 kids. Now, to have a tennis class for 40 kids, that translates to 10 courts playing doubles. So when we look at in the provision of the physical education, if tennis is one of the standards that is to be taught, how will 40 kids be using tennis? Oftentimes there may be only 4 courts on the site. So how do the other kids play? Maybe you can play 4-on-4 or 8-on-8 or whatever it works out to be. And that's important because at that time, then the teacher has to split the class, half play tennis and half do something else, which creates supervision problems. Imagine 20, 15-year-old kids with tennis rackets and no supervision. 4 basketball courts could be a teaching station. 2 softball fields. So keep that in mind as you look at how to provide it. Do the kids physically fit on the space without having to wait for someone to finish their tennis game and play, so that their activity is, their 40 minutes a day is filled with activity, not waiting. Okay? A classroom for lecture and other events is also needed to meet the framework. Understanding kinesthetics, the opportunity to do heart monitoring, a large space to instruct 40 kids. Perhaps a space larger than a standard 960 square foot classroom is needed for the physical education curriculum. Right? Now, some of the common electives that we see for spaces are weightlifting spaces, dance, fitness, which can be both part of the required curriculum for the lower 9th and 10th grade, as well as some of the electives. And those can either be separate teaching stations, they can be multi-use spaces. Other considerations is access to drinking water. 40 kids, you would need a lot of drinking fountains for so they don't have to wait in line. In one of our best practice documents, Healthy Children Ready to Learn, we show some examples of some portable drinking stations where you can have 5 or 6 bubblers attached to a portable cart. That may help in this. Access to technology, heart monitors, both indoor and outdoor access, so you can plug into the internet and other data to monitor movements, heart rates. Transition time, and keeping the required minutes of 40 or 20 per day. How much time is set for transition? How do they have to walk clean across campus? How much time for setting up and tearing down? Want to make sure that there's ample time for the setup to take place that doesn't infringe upon the instruction time. And as always, supervision, to make sure that the kids are in a spot that can be supervised and aren't hidden by bushes, buildings, ball walls. Right? So that's some of the things we would look at when a district is required to do the physical education plan for us. But it's always a good format to use in any planning project. Other things to keep in mind is to master plan the site to provide physical education space for all high school students, so that your governing board has the opportunity to expand physical education to all students. They may not choose to allow the upper grades to have the exemption. If that happens, do you have enough PE lockers, enough office space for the additional PE teachers, storage for equipment? Other things to keep in mind are Field Act and Title V. If you have a joint use with the city park, does that city park meet Title V standards? If it's required to use that property to meet the curriculum, we're going to want to see that it meets Title V standards. Here's some resources. The physical education framework adopted by the State Board of Education. We'll go into greater detail about how to address each of those 9 areas, and the specific California Code of Regulations sections, both in the site 14010 and 14030 in the plan section, talking about field areas, multi-purpose rooms, gyms. Our best practice document, Healthy Children Ready to Learn, has a number of good examples of how districts have done some adaptive uses on smaller sites. And our physical education planning guidance has a process where a district can go through 7 or 8 steps to determine how many types of spaces are needed, providing all 9 areas, and making sure that at the elementary schools, especially recess and lunch, don't overlap with the use of the field areas for physical education. So I think that's it for me and it for all of us. There's anything else? Okay. And if the meeting's at CDE, if you haven't been there before, come early to find the parking spot. It can be a little cramped.
Thank you, Fred. Hopefully that 200 minutes or 400 minutes is like a cumulative 30 minutes a day, not like 200 minutes on the 10th day. 200
minutes every 10 days, so you can do 40
cumulative,
minutes
right?
Every other day.
Because they're not going to stay in shape if they just do it once every 10 days. No. Sorry, bad joke. All right. Are there any follow-up questions, anything else at this point? All right, Lau, you happy? Okay. Thank you, everyone. That concludes our pre-SAB meeting.